The first time the alert activated, no one believed it was real. I was standing on the upper ring of the council chamber, watching 12 species argue over jurisdiction lines and salvage rights, when every light dimmed to a muted blue. Conversations died mid-syllable. A single glyph appeared above the central dais, ancient, angular, and unmistakably human in origin. Silence protocol. Human units quiet. The chamber did not erupt into panic. Not yet. Confusion came first. The Thauric's ambassador tilted his cranial fronds, confused irritation rippling through his bioluminescent veins. The karate defense speaker laughed, a harsh clicking sound, and demanded an explanation. Humans, seated as always in the back rows, did not move. They never did. Their stillness had long been mistaken for passivity. That assumption had cost the galaxy dearly. I had seen the alert only once before, buried in archived combat footage from a border war most preferred to forget. The footage ended abruptly. No aftermath. No survivors willing to testify. Just silence, followed by missing fleets and erased coordinates. The Council had classified it as coincidence. Humans had called it preparation. The glyph pulsed again. Across the chamber, tactical overlays flickered into existence, overriding local systems without resistance. That alone should have triggered evacuation protocols. It did not. Pride is a stubborn disease among empires. We trusted our shields, our numbers, our noise. Humans trusted something else entirely. A junior analyst whispered that human comm channels had gone dark across 7 contested systems. Not jammed. Not destroyed. Voluntarily muted. No chatter. No emotional leakage. No mistakes. When humans went quiet, it meant every decision had already been made. I felt my secondary hearts tighten as realizations spread unevenly through the chamber. The council speaker demanded answers from the human delegation. No response came. They sat motionless, hands folded, eyes forward. I noticed something then that chilled me more than the alert itself. Their pupils were dilated, breathing slowed, heart rates perfectly synchronized. This was not fear. It was focus. Reports began streaming in despite the speaker's protests. An advance fleet from the Karate Vanguard had vanished inside a gravity well that had not existed minutes earlier. A Thauric's listening post reported sensor ghosts, entire armadas detected, and then gone between scans. On 3 planets, ground forces advanced confidently into terrain that no longer behaved as mapped. Rivers shifted. Atmospheres thickened. Structures collapsed without visible cause. Still no human transmissions. No threats. No declarations of war. Just the quiet. I remembered a human phrase I had once dismissed as cultural bravado. If we're talking, we're thinking. If we stop talking, we're done thinking. At the time, it sounded like exaggeration. Watching the chamber now, I understood it as doctrine. The alert tone changed, dropping an octave. Silence protocol escalated. Somewhere beyond the chamber walls, fleets were dying without ever knowing why. The council speaker attempted to revoke human observer status, voice shaking as authority dissolved. It meant nothing. Humans had never needed permission to act. They had only waited for justification. A single human finally stood. Not the ambassador. Not a general. A civilian advisor, whose name I did not know. She looked tired, not angry. Her voice carried, without amplification. "We tried warning you," she said. "We asked for boundaries. We explained our methods. You mistook quiet for weakness." She paused, eyes scanning the chamber, meeting mine for a fraction of a second. In that glance, I saw regret layered beneath resolve. "When humans go quiet," she continued, "it means the simulation phase is over." The glyph vanished. So did every external feed. The chamber was left in darkness and silence, broken only by the sound of terrified breathing. Somewhere far beyond our reach, the galaxy was being reshaped by a species that no longer needed to speak. And the alert had only just begun. The silence did not end when the feeds went dark. It deepened, becoming something physical, a pressure that settled into the chamber and into my thoughts. Without external data, The council was blind, stripped of its greatest comfort, awareness. Humans remained seated, unmoving, as if they had expected this exact moment. Perhaps they had designed it. Emergency subroutines attempted to reassert control. They failed quietly, overridden with elegant efficiency. That alone told me more than any battlefield report ever could. This was not improvisation. It was execution. The galaxy had already stepped into a plan written long before today. A delayed transmission finally pierced the blackout, routed through ancient relay tech we barely remembered using. Visuals snapped on in fractured segments. Not live. Recorded. Time-stamped hours earlier. Human choice again. We were being allowed to see, not to intervene. The first image showed a karate task force entering what sensors marked as empty space. Their formation was perfect, weapons hot, crews confident. Then gravity folded. Not violently, not explosively, but subtly, like a thought-changing direction. Ships drifted apart, engines compensating too late. No weapons fired. Hulls tore themselves open under stresses no one had trained for. The recording ended before debris finished spreading. Another segment followed. Thalric's ground forces advancing through a rainforest world, bioluminescent and dense. Humans were nowhere visible. Then the terrain shifted. Roots hardened like steel. Canopies collapsed in precise patterns. Soldiers were separated, isolated, surrounded by a planet suddenly hostile in ways that felt intentional. Still no humans on screen. Still no gunfire. Around me, delegates whispered prayers, equations, apologies. The speaker demanded to know how humans could manipulate environments on such scales without detection. No one answered. I already suspected the truth, and it was worse than weapons. Humans did not conquer terrain. They studied it, simulated it, lived in it. Their silence was the moment they stopped reacting and allowed preparation to unfold. Every variable accounted for. Every outcome rehearsed. We were watching rehearsals become reality. The civilian advisor remained standing, hands clasped behind her back. She did not look at the screens. She did not need to. You call it combat, she said softly. We call it risk mitigation. The feeds continued. A coalition fleet attempted retreat, activating emergency jump protocols. Space itself resisted, lanes narrowing, calculations drifting just enough to cause catastrophic misalignment. Ships vanished mid-jump, not destroyed, simply misplaced. Lost to mathematics turned hostile. I realized then why the alert existed. Not to warn enemies, to warn allies. When humans went quiet, negotiation was over, mercy was rationed, and survival depended entirely on whether you were inside their parameters. My own species had supplied logistics to the initial coalition advance. Fuel, data, navigation models. We had believed ourselves neutral. Humans evidently disagreed. The lights brightened slightly as internal power stabilized. The council chamber felt smaller now, like a bunker waiting for impact. The advisor finally turned back toward her seat. Message delivered. This is still the limited response, she said. If the alert reaches full saturation, we stop shaping outcomes and start ending possibilities. No one spoke. No one dared. Because the silence was not absence. It was intent. I felt it then, a shift beneath the fear, the understanding that survival was no longer about allegiance, but about predictability. Humans spared what they could model. Anything outside their expectations became noise, and noise was removed. Somewhere, unseen equations were still running, silent minds adjusting probabilities while the rest of us waited. The alert did not count casualties. It measured compliance. And as the chamber sat frozen in breathless stillness, I understood the final truth the archives had hidden. The quiet was not the beginning of human violence. It was the sound of the galaxy being judged. That judgment was ongoing, unseen, and utterly indifferent, and I knew with certainty that when the humans finally spoke again, it would only be to announce what had already been decided. The silence stretched on, and with every passing second, the Council's fate narrowed, collapsing toward an outcome none of US could escape. We waited, powerless, knowing the alert had only reached its midpoint. And the quiet was not finished yet. The silence fractured not with sound, but with motion. A human hand lifted, slow and deliberate, and the chamber's gravity shifted by a fraction of a percent. It was subtle, barely noticeable, yet every non-human delegate stiffened as balance recalibrated instinctively. Humans adjusted without effort. They had already accounted for the change. That alone told me this chamber, this moment, had been part of their projections. New feeds appeared without request. Not battles this time, but diagrams. Flowing networks of probability, branching outcomes collapsing into singular lines. Entire wars reduced to cascading decisions. Human foresight made visible, not to boast, but to explain. Or perhaps to warn. This is the third phase, the advisor said. Her voice remained calm, unraised, cutting through the room more effectively than any weapon. You're experiencing containment. Containment. The word echoed inside me. Not conquest. Not retaliation. Containment implied something dangerous already loose. A highlighted region appeared. My species' trade corridor. Logistics nodes we had guarded for centuries glowed amber. Not destroyed. Not seized. Merely isolated. Routes rerouted by gravitational anomalies, so precise they could only have been engineered months ago. Our fleets would find no enemies there. Just empty space and fuel depletion. We anticipated support vectors, the advisor continued. Not because you're hostile, but because you're predictable. I swallowed. Predictable meant survivable. For now. The feeds shifted again. A human-forward operating base on a marginal moon, long dismissed as a listening post. The recording showed it days earlier, bustling with activity. Not soldiers. Engineers. Ecologists. Sociologists. Children, even. Humans teaching probability with dice, modeling chaos as play. I finally understood where the simulations began. Not in war rooms. In classrooms. The attack came next. Coalition shock troops landing in force, weapons primed, expecting resistance. They found none. The base was empty. No retreat signatures. No evacuation alarms. Just silence. Then the moon itself responded. Seismic lines rippled outward, triggered by micro-adjustments to its unstable mantle. Landing craft toppled. Atmosphere vents ruptured. Not catastrophically. Precisely. Troops were trapped, alive, immobilized, surrounded by a world that no longer supported intrusion. The advisor's voice returned. We left them food, water, medical supplies. They'll be retrieved when hostilities end. Mercy rationed. A murmur swept the chamber. Someone asked why humans would go to such lengths rather than strike decisively. The advisor's expression softened, just slightly. Because we're not trying to win, she said. We're trying to stop you from forcing us to finish. That was when the alert tone changed again. Not louder. Closer. As if it had moved inside us. Silence protocol. Deep phase. The diagrams vanished. In their place, a single line of text. Threat modeled. Response adjusting. My people's nodes dimmed from amber to blue. Relief washed through me, sharp and fragile. Others were not so fortunate. Several delegates watched their territories flicker red, then disappear entirely from the display. No explosion. No spectacle. Just removal. As if those regions had never existed. I understood then that humans were not fighting fleets or armies. They were pruning futures. The advisor finally sat. Humans around her stirred, barely perceptible movements signaling internal communication resuming. Still no spoken words between them. They didn't need to speak aloud. The quiet was theirs, a shared mental space refined through generations of survival. The council speaker attempted to stand, failed as gravity subtly pinned him back into a seat. The advisor did not look at him. Remain still, she said gently. Movement introduces uncertainty. Fear is loud. Panic screams. But the chamber remained silent, frozen by the understanding that noise itself had become dangerous. Every thought I had was measured now, filtered through the realization that humans could already be accounting for it. The silence stretched, not empty but alive, humming with calculation. Somewhere beyond our perception, lines were still being drawn, outcomes still collapsing. And then, for the first time since the alert began, a human smiled. It was not cruel. It was anticipatory, because the galaxy had not yet reached the point where humans needed to speak again. And when they did, it would mean the final phase had arrived. Time lost meaning inside the chamber. Without feeds, without clocks we trusted, existence narrowed to breath and thought. The silence pressed in until even fear felt muted, dampened by the awareness that any extreme emotion might ripple outward, detectable to minds already modeling everything we were. Humans remained still, but now their stillness felt active, like predators pausing mid-hunt, muscles coiled beneath calm skin. Then the gravity released. Not fully, just enough. The council's speaker slumped forward, gasping, authority leaking from him like air from a ruptured seal. No one moved to help. We all understood the lesson. Humans allowed comfort only when it served stability. A new presence filled the chamber, not visual, not auditory.
Pattern.
Probability. I felt it brush the edges of my perception, a sense of being observed from angles I didn't possess. Humans had opened their internal network, not to communicate with us, but to synchronize with something larger. The advisor stood again. "This is the part you don't have records for," she said, "because it's never been shared outside our species." The floor beneath us shimmered, resolving into a three-dimensional projection of Earth. Not the pristine version archived in xenological databases, but a layered one. Fault lines, storm systems, population densities overlapping disaster zones. A planet perpetually on the edge of catastrophe, survived not by control, but by adaptation. "We evolved here," she continued. "Every day was practice. Earth trained us to expect failure, to plan without certainty, to act without consensus. Silence wasn't cultural. It was necessary." The projection fractured, branching into thousands of simulated Earths, each subjected to different stresses. In nearly every one, humanity endured.
Scarred.
Reduced. Changed. But never erased. "By the time we reached the stars," she said, "we had already lost our home 1,000 times in theory. We know exactly what it takes to make extinction fail." The image shifted outward, expanding into the galaxy. Trade routes. Empires. Borders drawn and redrawn over centuries. Human presence marked not as territory, but as probability distortions. Places where war stalled. Where empires collapsed without clear cause. Where plans unraveled. "We don't escalate," the advisor said. "We conclude." The silence sharpened. I felt something else then. Not fear. Recognition. The humans weren't angry. They weren't even defensive anymore. This was corrective action, as natural to them as stabilizing a reactor or sealing a hull breach. A delegate from the outer colonies broke protocol and screamed. The sound echoed, harsh and sudden. Instantly, the chamber responded. Gravity spiked around him alone, pinning his limbs, compressing his vocal apparatus until the scream choked itself into nothing. The advisor didn't look at him. "Please," she said softly. "We're almost finished." The alert glyph reappeared, altered now. Its edges smoother, its glow steady. Final silence phase. Active. I understood the shift before the explanation came. Humans were no longer shaping events in real time. They had handed control to systems built from centuries of data, simulations refined by lived trauma. Autonomous judgment, bounded only by human ethics and survival thresholds. The galaxy was no longer reacting to humans. It was being filtered by them. Entire regions blinked out of the projection. Not destroyed. Disconnected. Cut from navigation networks, communications dampened to cosmic background noise. Civilizations left intact but isolated, frozen in their own spheres until deemed safe to re-enter a shared future. "This isn't punishment," the advisor said. "It's quarantine." My species' projection remained visible. Blue. Stable. My limbs trembled with relief and shame in equal measure. We had survived not through strength or wisdom, but by accident of predictability. The advisor finally looked directly at the council speaker. "You wanted to know why the alert exists," she said. "It's not for when we're angry. It's for when we're quiet enough to listen to everything at once." The silence began to lift, slowly, like pressure easing after a long dive. Humans stirred, murmurs passing between them for the first time. Systems around us cautiously rebooted, though none of us trusted what we would see when full visibility returned. As the lights brightened, the advisor offered one final statement, her voice carrying the weight of inevitability. "This concludes the limited response. Whether there is a broader one depends entirely on what you do next." She sat. The chamber remained still, not from force now, but from understanding. Because somewhere beyond our sight, the systems humans had unleashed were still running, still watching, and not yet finished deciding whether the galaxy deserved to hear them speak again. Sound returned first. A low hum of systems reawakening, the faint crackle of atmospheric stabilizers correcting themselves. It felt obscene, almost disrespectful, after so much quiet. The council chamber lights brightened fully, revealing faces drained of certainty, eyes darting as if danger might still strike from empty air. Humans remained seated, but now they breathed normally. The hunt, it seemed, was paused, not ended. Data feeds cautiously reconnected. Star maps bloomed back into existence, though scarred by absence. Whole sectors were gone, not marked as destroyed, simply unreachable. Navigation algorithms refused to plot courses through them. Communications returned only static. The galaxy had holes now, deliberate blind spots cut with surgical restraint. The council speaker stood at last, legs unsteady. He did not speak. He stared at the maps, at the quiet testimony of what restraint looked like when wielded by something capable of annihilation. I realized then what unsettled me most. Humans had not demonstrated their full power. They had demonstrated their ability to stop, to choose limits, to pause on the edge of finality and wait for a response. The advisor rose, one final time. "You have a window," she said. "A narrow one. The systems we activated are adaptive. They learn from your behavior. Cooperation expands access. Aggression tightens containment." Someone asked, voice trembling, what would happen if the galaxy failed that test? The advisor did not answer immediately. She looked inward, listening to something none of us could hear. When she spoke again, the chamber felt colder. "Then the silence will deepen," she said. "And next time, it won't be reversible." A soft tone sounded. Not an alarm. A notification. The glyph appeared once more, smaller now, subdued. "Silence protocol. Stand by. Stand by." The word carried more dread than escalation ever could. Standby meant readiness. It meant the quiet could return instantly, without debate, without warning. The galaxy would live knowing that at any moment, humans could stop speaking again. The human delegation stood as one. No ceremony, no farewell. As they turned to leave, I felt a pull, an instinctual urge to say something, anything, to fill the void before it swallowed us again. I found my voice. "Advisor," I called, surprising myself with the steadiness of my tone. If the galaxy learns restraint, will the alert ever be removed?" She paused, looked back at me. "No," she said gently. "We don't remove smoke detectors just because a building hasn't burned down yet." Then the humans were gone. The chamber doors sealed behind them with a finality that echoed louder than any explosion. Around me, delegates began to speak in hushed tones, plans forming, alliances reconsidered, histories rewritten in real time. Everyone understood the same truth now. Power in the galaxy had shifted, not to those who shouted the loudest, but to those who could afford to be silent. As I reviewed the remaining data, a private channel flickered to life on my console. Unauthorized. Unblocked. Human in origin. A single line of text appeared. Observation mode active. No signature. No explanation. I stared at the words. My reflection ghosted across the screen. Observation mode meant we were no longer being constrained. We were being studied, measured, judged not by what we said in councils or declared in treaties, but by patterns, by choices made when no one thought humans were watching. Beyond the chamber walls, ships would move. Fleets would reposition. Empires would decide whether to test boundaries or retreat into caution. Every action would feed the same silent system still humming beneath reality, still calculating futures. I felt the weight of that gaze settle over the galaxy, like a second sky. Somewhere, far beyond our perception, humans were quiet again. Not because they were finished, but because they were listening. And this time, they were listening to see if we deserved to hear them speak at all.